Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. We are continuing the station of Tadhakur and Tafakkur, and the last section of this station talks about the 5 types of actions or things that people do that taint the heart. These are 5 toxic practices, I should say. The first one is kathratul ikhtilat, having excessive socializing with people. Right? This habit of excessively socializing is harmful to the heart. This is what Ibn Qayyim is saying. And there's some details here, so let's not let our minds wander and draw conclusions before understanding his point of view. And Ibn Qayyim really describes socializing as a fume or smog, a toxic fume that clouds the heart or clouds the hearts of the children of Adam until it becomes blackened and really it becomes dispersed. It becomes dispersed and disunited, full of stress and anxiety and grief and pressure for what it has to hold, even though it cannot really hold all of that responsibility. And what Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi is saying here is the following. If a Muslim is trying to be dedicated to the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, we know how valuable it is to help someone else. We know how important it is to be honest. We know how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes dishonesty. We know how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes us to, be straightforward and non-two-faced with people. That if we make a promise or say something, we follow up on that. Now, when a person is socializing extensively, right, that becomes very difficult. Very difficult, because you are dealing with people as far right and as far left as you can imagine. You are dealing with people who are, weaker, meaning they need people to help them in order for them to sustain themselves. Right? You're dealing with people who are stronger, who are thinking, how can I overpower the other people? You are dealing with people who might be in a financial burden, or people who are financially stable, but at the same time they have an amount of arrogance. You're dealing with a whole spectrum of people. And you as a Muslim, your goal is to be as dedicated to Islam as possible. The person you are as a Muslim is the same with all of these people. And that becomes very difficult to navigate, right? So what happens is when someone excessively socializes, all of these burdens start coming on this individual. Okay? Whether it's a sincere desire to help someone or being toyed with by someone who has ill intentions, right? So it becomes very difficult to navigate this terrain, and it leads to all this stress and this anxiety and worry. So for example, psychologists, right? Psychologists need counseling. It is a healthy habit for psychologists to constantly get counseling to make sure that they're stable. From the psychologists or the counselors and therapists I've talked to, this is part of the customs and the routines of a psychological clinic, or for example, they need to make sure that my own well-being is still on track from how much they hear from people. And it's a type of responsibility. Now this person has come to me with their problems, right? And I am responsible. I feel a responsibility of trying to help them. And a lot of times there's really not much more I can do than listen to them and be that friendly ear or friendly shoulder they can cry on. And that's very valuable and important, right? But for the individuals, I wish I can do more. When you look at the news, for example, excessively watching news, if Ibn Qayyim was here today, he'd probably say don't watch too much news, right? It's very very toxic and harmful to the heart, because each news channel is trying to portray their own worldview, right? And you just see this chaos and overpowering injustice that has masked the world, clouded the world. And you look at yourself and you look at, for example, countries who are capable, who have the power of stopping these injustices, doing absolutely nothing. And a lot of times we fall into a trap, and I don't mean this in a negative way. It's not a negative perception, but we fall into a type of trap that perhaps a shaitan can utilize against us in saying that if I was in this position, I would stop this, right? And you feel this type of stress, but what happens sometimes, the shaitan sees that as a door that he can take advantage of and plant the idea, well, if you're willing to stop it, why isn't Allah stopping it? Right? And Ibn Jawzi comments on this, rahmatullah alayh. He says that one of the biggest mistakes of human beings is that they draw analogies between themselves, their self, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, if I would do this, why isn't Allah doing this? Well, Allah knows a lot more than you, and is considering a lot more than you, and that's why He's choosing to do what He does, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Part of Allah's mercy is that He allows things to happen. Now, our mercy is not like Allah's mercy. Our mercy is confined to our worldly affairs. Right? When I am merciful towards someone, I'm trying to enrich their life or to help them in one way or another. And part of that help, obviously, or maybe even the primary compassion of a believer is trying to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because what's better to a person than to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But you can see how our mercy is relative and relevant to the world that we live in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah deals with a lot more. He knows a lot more, in a sense that He's also looking at the next life as well. So people draw these analogies without considering these different variables, and they come to incorrect conclusions. So when we excessively mix with people, right, it leads to this type of hardening of the heart, or these challenges in the heart that really they're like a toxic fume, clouding our judgment, causing us to be dispersed. I am thinking about so many people now, right? It sometimes leads to forgetting about the self. And this is not to say that our primary concern is the self. Not really. One of the greatest deeds, as the Prophet ﷺ says, إِدْخَالُ السُّرُورِ فِي قَلْبِ مُسْلِمٍ. One of the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing happiness and joy to the heart of a believer. Right? But at the same time, if doing that is going to lead the self or cause the self to become more distant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we have to say no. Your primary concern is being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Not bringing others close to Allah or bringing them happiness at the expense of your own relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And we all socialize. We all mix with people. And I think you can appreciate the angle Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah is coming from. Being with people, being around people really opens the doors to many sins. I'm not talking about massive, major sins, right? I'm talking about smaller sins, like lying sometimes, or why didn't you come to that meeting the other day, or why weren't you there? And you have your own personal reason, but you don't want people to know. Now you have to say something, that's not true in order to divert any misconceptions about you, right? Or, for example, mixing with people sometimes leads to inappropriate gender engagement or socializing sometimes, right? Sometimes it leads to, you have to go to that wedding, and it leads to certain things that aren't correct, right? You all have examples of this. Now, this is what Ibn Qayyim is kind of telling us, be cautious of. And he then lists a series of, or before that, he gives a very beautiful example of how harmful socializing can be. Now, this is a unique scenario, and although it's not exclusive to this individual, it can happen elsewhere, but it just kind of gives you a certain lens to look through, right? To kind of judge and view the world. And that is, he gives the example of the Prophet ﷺ's uncle, Abu Talib. Now, Abu Talib, right, he was an adamant defender of the Prophet ﷺ. He was the political and social shield for the Prophet. Without Abu Talib, the Prophet ﷺ would have been overpowered by the other clans within Quraysh. It would have happened. But Abu Talib remained on the religion of his father, Abdul Muttalib, which was the adulterated version of the paganistic version of Ibrahim alayhi religion, right? And at the moment when he was on his deathbed, in the final moments of his life, you had the Prophet ﷺ on one side, and you had Abu Jahl and one other on the other side. Now, Abu Jahl being the leader of Quraysh at that time, of course, or Abu Talib was the leader, and then Abu Jahl was definitely one of the elites of Quraysh. So the Prophet ﷺ would tell him, Abu Talib, my uncle, say La ilaha illallah. Say La ilaha illallah, and if you say that, I can argue on your behalf on the Day of Judgment. Just say it. And the Prophet ﷺ says he wanted to say it. But Abu Jahl, after the Prophet ﷺ would stop talking, would say, will you leave the religion of your fathers? Right? And then the Prophet ﷺ would try again. Look how polite they were with one another. They were arch enemies, right? But it's not like today where, when people get mad, they start yelling and throwing things. They were staying silent and letting the other finish. So Abu Talib takes his last decision. And this is literally seconds before he takes his last breath. And he says, I die on the religion of my father. Right? He was about to say La ilaha illallah. But that friend of his, Abu Jahl, right? That one word that he wouldn't say, because he was encouraged by Abu Jahl not to say it, and he was dissuaded by Abu Jahl not to accept the Prophet ﷺ's message, right? That's going to lead to what? An eternity of hellfire. One word, because one person said something at the wrong time. And this is how serious it can be. And there are a few verses we can look at. One is in Surah Al-Furqan, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا يَا وَيْلَتَى لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِلْإِنسَانِ خَذُولًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, on that day, the Day of Judgment, you'll find people chewing and biting their fingertips or their hands. You know how sometimes when we're really upset or, oh my God, we're shocked, we kind of put our hand in our mouth, right? You'll find people doing that. And what they are saying is that, I wish I took the path of the Prophet. I wish I didn't take so-and-so as a close friend. They misguided me after, the clarity has been, after religion has been made clear to me. And indeed, the shaitan deceives the human being. Right? That is a moment we don't want to be in. And another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says at the end, towards the end of Surah Al-Zukhruf, الْأَخِلَّاءُ يَوْمَئِذٍ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ عَدُوٌ إِلَّا الْمُتَّقِينَ. The close friends on the Day of Judgment will be enemies of one another. Of course, these are the close friends when it comes to disbelievers, not believers. On the contrary, in the believers on the Day of Judgment, that friendship is enhanced and even further strengthened. But for the disbelievers who their friendship was built in a way that reinforced their false ideologies, right? They will be enemies of one another on the Day of Judgment, except the illa al-muttaqin, except the righteous people. They will be, or the people of taqwa, they will be friends, and their friendship will be even stronger. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ إِنَّمَا اتَّخَذْتُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَوْثَانًا مَوَدَّةَ بَيْنِكُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا ثُمَّ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَكْفُرُ بَعْضُكُمْ بِبَعْضٍ وَيَلْعَنُ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا وَمَأْوَاكُمُ النَّارُ وَمَا لَكُمْ مِن نَاصِرِينَ. Allah here is quoting Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam. And by the way, just as a side point, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes someone in the Quran, it doesn't necessarily mean this is exactly what they said, right? It is the meaning of what the individual said, because none of these individuals, or the vast majority of the people quoted in the Quran, didn't speak Arabic. So at least it's a translation of what was said, right? So just as a side point. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about what Ibrahim alayhi told his people. And he said that you built your friendship, right, and your bonds based on your false deities. You have these false deities, and it creates this type of clique, or this type of bond. And this is normal human behavior. Birds of a feather flock together, right? That's what they say. This is normal human behavior. But what Ibrahim ﷺ says that, however, on the day of judgment, you will disassociate yourselves from one another. You don't want to be associated with that person because that person isn't doing so hot. And you know how when a group of people get caught doing a crime, so I don't know this person, right? You try to disassociate yourself from them so that you're not held accountable with that person, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us these verses among others that really show us and teach us to be cautious of who we take as friends, because that can affect our behavior and often does affect our behavior in this life, which will have consequences in the next life. Also, it's important to really be honest with ourselves that when people build friendships in this life, those friendships are built off self-interest. That's the reality, right? I have an interest in being a friend of this person. Again, normal human behavior. However, what happens is the following, that when those interests are achieved or obtained, or we feel like they can no longer be fulfilled, those bonds begin to break. They just break apart. Why? Because what was holding them together is no longer there, therefore it falls apart. And in the Arabic language, a mother is called right? And linguistically means that which gathers something, right? It's a place of gathering, or a point of gathering. So, for example, it has that meaning. Why? Because the mother is kind of the gathering point for the family. She's what keeps the family together. And that's true. So, when the mother passes on, a lot of times the relationship starts to slowly die out. Why? Because what was holding them is no longer there. So when we deal with others, right, let's be real and understand, people's intentions. And again, this isn't an issue of morality and immorality. This is natural. However, in order to fortify ourselves and to protect our behaviors, right, when a person encourages us to do something forbidden or to do something that takes us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember that the only reason this person is interested in me or a friend of mine is because there's something they gain from me. And again, I don't say this in a pessimistic way or a way that judges others as being inappropriate or immoral or ill-intended. That's not what I'm saying. It's natural, right? We have friends. Sometimes we like a friend because they're funny and we get a good laugh out of them, right? But it's important that when it comes to this tension between socializing and our piety, we always give the edge to our piety, right? Why? Because I know that this person, if they lose interest in me, they'll stop calling, right? Or if I serve as or create some sort of burden for that person, they tend to draw back, right? So this person is limited in what they can provide me, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlimited in what He can provide me, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not about disassociating ourselves from current friends or starting to look at them in a negative manner, right? I don't want you to go and say, hey, why do you like me, right? It's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that when that tension arises, it's helpful to remember the reality of our relationships and our bonds so that it doesn't step upon our relationship and bond with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Okay. With that, now the bond of, one more point on that, the bond of religion on the other hand, now that is a truly strong bond. That's really, if it's built correctly, it's unbreakable. Why? Because that bond isn't me directly to you. It is me to Allah to you. And I think I've explained this before. When we say, for example, I love you for the sake of Allah, or I am helping you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the type of bonds and relationships that we want to build. Right? I am doing this for the sake of Allah. What does that mean? It means my love for you is not simply because you are you, or because there's a certain attribute that you have. My love for you is based on my assumption or my belief that Allah loves you. So you are a pious person, you pray 5 times a day and you fast Ramadan and you give your zakah, and Allah loves those type of people. So because Allah loves you, I love you. So that chain is going through Allah, that bond is going through Allah back down to you. Now, it's not overnight that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're just going to say, oh Allah, you know what? Yesterday Allah loved you and today Allah doesn't love you anymore. Right? And therefore, I have to break that bond. It doesn't work like that. So you might do something that offends me, for example, or I might do something that offends you. But that bond isn't broken. Why? Because just because you offended me does not mean Allah no longer loves you. And because Allah loves you, I have to continue to love you because I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is very strong bonds that are founded on a very strong foundation, very strong pillars that can't be just chopped apart or blown down with the slightest gust of wind. Right? So this is what it means to love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I might not like you as a personality. I don't like your type of personality. I think you're not funny, or you're just weird, whatever. But you do what Allah says that He loves. And therefore, because I love Allah, I have to love you too. And I will take care of you and I'll treat you just like I treat anyone else. This is a true bond. This is a true relationship, true brotherhood. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the believers, the believing males and the believing females are guardians, are protectors of one another. And what does He say? What makes this bond is that they enjoin the good and they forbid the evil. And they establish prayer and they give zakah. Right? It's a religious idea. It's a religious bond that goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? I am not praying, I'm not giving zakah, I'm not enjoining good or forbidding evil because you appreciate that. I'm doing it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appreciates that. But that is what creates this guardianship, this friendship, this brotherhood and sisterhood between the Muslims. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is our center point, our gathering point, not individual interests, right? So, with that, Ibn Qayyim then talks about really reality. That's nice, but let's be real. We have to socialize. Not only is it part of human nature, meaning if humans were to be secluded or isolated from society, it will cause, problems. It will cause psychological problems, mental illnesses. It might even cause, medical illnesses. That's just the reality. We are a social being. We need to be around people, right? And we also have certain responsibilities towards society. You invited someone to your wedding and they showed up. And now they're inviting you to their wedding. Well, you better show up, right? And there are these responsibilities, and this is good. This is something good because it creates this type of, okay, I have rights, but I also have responsibilities, right? Someone did something to me, well, I have to return that favor. It creates this type of awareness, social awareness, where it's not just about me. It's about the group or about others as well. I need to understand myself and my responsibilities, not in light of my own self-interest, but I need to take into account my relatives or my friends or my community, right? This is something good. It helps us stay within a certain paradigm that we can, relate to each other through and also take care of each other with. What happens with, for example, these younger generations of me, myself, and I, that really they're always criticizing the customs of the previous generation. Oh, you do this, and why do you do that? And those are so weird, and why do you do this? And why is the wedding like this? And why is the wedding like? I understand right? I understand the concerns. Sometimes these customs are really, really weird and unnecessary, right? You have to do this before the wedding, and then that before the wedding, and then after the wedding you have to do that. Okay, well, why, right? But at the same time, right, these customs help keep things in order. It's not randomness. Everyone is in their own world, and they do whatever they want. There is this type of structure, and the structure helps keep society intact. It helps keep the mind intact, our beliefs intact. Right? It embeds certain principles within the society. No, you have to show up to your cousin's wedding because they showed up to your wedding. Well, why do I have to do that? Well, customs. What? Okay, I don't care about customs. Well, you should care about customs. Ibn Aqil, one of the Hanbali scholars, said that whoever goes against customs that are permissible in Islam has done something forbidden. Because it's these customs that keep us together. Yes, I understand some of the customs are unnecessary. I understand it. Wallah, I understand that. Right? And I understand that some of them are even excessive and quite burdening. But there's something else that comes about from these customs, and that is that structure. Embedding certain principles within our society. That you are responsible towards your cousin. You have a responsibility. They have a right over you. This is a type of embedded idea that comes through this structure called customs. So how do we navigate this now? So Ibn Qayyim provides certain guidelines. And he says that a person should primarily do their best to socialize in that which is positive, of course from a religious perspective, positive for the individual. Meaning, we should try our best to limit our socializing in aspects that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as Jum'ah prayer. So one of the goals of praying in the masjid, whether it's Jum'ah or the regular 5 daily prayers, is there is a social element to that. That when you are together, you become accustomed to those who are in the community. And if someone goes missing, after 2 days, people start, where's so-and-so? Are they okay? Let's give them a call. This happens often. Someone is very ill, right? And they need some help. And they are irregular at the masjid, so the masjid goers call and say, are you okay? Well, I know I've been sick. Okay, let's go visit that person, make sure that they're okay, give them some gifts, right? There is that social element to it. Also, when it comes to work, a lot of the youth, when they're looking for a job or looking for a spouse, for example, right? And they ask me for my advice. I say, come to the masjid. Come to the masjid. Because, that the regulars at the masjid tend to be in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? And they're professionals. A lot of them own their own businesses, or they're managers in companies, or they are vice presidents or whatever, right? Get in contact with them. That is a very, very useful resource. Also, they have daughters of marriage age, or they know people, right? But look, part of our customs is that I'm not just going to give my daughter or my son to some random person I don't know. Well, we need to ask. We need to make sure that they're marrying into a family that's not going to, make their hair gray, right? Well, if you are irregular at the masjid and you are known, it makes the process a lot easier. Oh yeah, I know that person. He's always at the masjid. Isha prayer, Fajr prayer. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because the assumption is that someone who is committed to at least Isha and Fajr prayer, right? That's a decent person. Maybe not a perfect person, but that's a decent person. So, gathering or socializing in the masjid, right? Making the masjid a center point for our socializing. Also, for our holidays, during our holidays, that is a healthy way to socialize. Hajj is a very social event. Maybe not so much today, but back in the day before mass media, right? Hajj that's how people knew what was going on in the rest of the world, the rest of the Muslim world. Or else information traveled very, very slowly. Something can happen by the time it reaches other parts of the Muslim society. It was already done and over with, and they're recovering now. Right? So Hajj was a place where people gathered and they traded ideas and they learned from one another, right? Also, dhikrillah, remembrance of Allah, gatherings to remember Allah. I'm not talking about just the subhanallah, just the actual. I'm talking about lectures, talks, whatever, all those learning, seeking knowledge, all that, conventions, right? This is a type of socializing that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the setting is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worshipping Allah, teaching about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we try our best to limit our or I shouldn't say limit. We should try our best to satisfy our social needs through these venues, right? If, however, we need to socialize outside of that, when it comes to worldly affairs, we need to follow the following, or try our best to follow the following, right? You have social affairs that are clearly outside the boundaries of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows, right? And you have social gatherings that are mubah, permissible. Come, let's have some tea or coffee, permissible, right? Come, let's watch a movie together, permissible, right? So let's start with that one. When it comes to that, right, how do we deal with this? Our first goal is to try and change the setting into something that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're having a cup of tea, right? Well, why don't you throw a hadith out? Today I was at this session and we were talking about this, and this hadith that I forgot about or I read a long time ago but forgot about, or I learned something new about it. Give him a piece of hadith. Yes, you will get that face. Oh my God, there goes the sheikha. Oh, here we go. Oh, okay. So when did you become religious, right? It's okay. Be patient with that. That's what the prophets were patient with that. You're all smiling because it's true, right? It's true. And I can understand how annoying that can be and how discouraging that can be. But remember, the prophets went through that, right? The prophets went exactly through the same exact thing. So try and change something that is permissible to something that is pleasing to Allah by throwing out a hadith or a verse or a mention, or reminding people of let's go ahead and pray jama'ah, right? Let's do something, even if it's one thing. You never know when one thing can truly change a person's life. And I was listening to a sister she was on YouTube. I don't know who she is, but she was talking about her studies in Syria, and she was there in the 70s. And I guess in Syria in the 70s there was a feminist revolution going on, and during that time, it was very normal for a woman to go around in a shorter skirt. I mean, can you imagine that in the Muslim world? A Muslim lady walking around in a shorter skirt. You don't see that today, subhanAllah. You won't see that today, except rarely. So the teacher was a mathematician at the university, and the person speaking said, I had a class with her, and we looked up to her because she had this strong personality. She was the only female mathematician, right? Maybe even in the country. But in the university for sure, she was the only female mathematician. And she got a lot for that, just like what was going on here in the US. So the female students like to gather with her and after class and outside of class and outside of university and talk, right? And she said one time I went and I joined them. And again, she wasn't a hijabi lady, and she was wearing a skirt, a shorter skirt. And the rest of the female students were all wearing hijab, right? And they were gathering, they were talking. I guess the teacher was trying to influence them. But she said that we were talking, okay, I got the story wrong. Let me step back. The sister who's speaking in the YouTube video, she says that she was at she was doing a tilawa test, recitation of the Quran, with a lady. So this was one of the top reciters of the Quran in Syria. So she's talking to her, right? And as she began reciting, she got nervous. And when that nervousness really gathers on a person, it kind of stops them, right? So the teacher now is telling her, take a breath, be calm. And to kind of calm her mind, right? She said, do you know my story? This is the reciter. She said, do you know what? She said, no, I don't know your story. She said, let me tell you my story. I was that mathematician, this top reciter of the Quran in Syria, right? And Syria is really Islamic knowledge there is stronger, right? And she's saying, I was that lady. And I was sitting in a gathering of all these women, right? And I was trying to influence them. But she said all of a sudden in this gathering, the Prophet ﷺ was mentioned. And we started talking about the Prophet ﷺ. She said, I had no idea what changed the topic, how it changed. And it was at that moment I realized all the ladies, all the female students were all wearing hijab. And I was the only one without it. And she changed her life entirely to something else, right? So never underestimate even one hadith and the power of one hadith. So if you are sitting in such a gathering, try and change it to something that brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you cannot, right? If you cannot do that, then try and just remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to yourself. Have that masbahah, or those beads, and recite and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your own self. Sometimes what happens, the shaitan will come and start saying you're doing this ostentatiously. You're showing off. You just want them to look at you and say, oh look, or you want to have the stronger voice, or you're the one who you want to be the one who is driving the conversation. He'll throw this in your mind. Ibn Qayyim says ignore it. Ignore it, because the good that will come out of it is what's frightening the shaitan and trying to stop you. So he puts these thoughts in your mind and tries to discourage you from speaking using false premises, or creating a premise that doesn't really exist. You're trying to be ostentatious when that's not the case. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and try to encourage people to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. If the gathering, however, is one that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning there's clear sinning occurring. Now, of course, if we know that a gathering is going to be clearly a sinning gathering, then we shouldn't go in the first place. But let's just assume that you go to a place thinking that it's okay, nothing shady is going on, but it turns into something like that. What should you do then? You should try and do the enjoining good and forbidding evil. Right? You should try to do that. But if you are unable to, then as Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayh says, that what you should do is be present, but what's the word? Present. What's the opposite of present? Present, but your body is there, but your mind isn't. Right? People think that you're listening, but you're really not listening. Rather, your heart is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're there as a body, not as a mind. That's it. Right? So try and do that. The second thing that poisons the heart is tamanni, wishful thinking. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that this is one of the primary or the strongest plans or plots of the shaitan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about shaitan, Iblis, Satan, وَقَالَ لَأَتَّخِذَنَّ مِنْ عِبَادِكَ نَصِيبًا مَفْرُوضًا وَلَأُضِلَّنَّهُمْ وَلَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُبَتِّكُنَّ آذَانَ الْأَنْعَامِ. He says that the shaitan took an oath, saying that I take an oath by you, I swear by you, right, that I am going to misguide them, meaning the human beings, and I am going to make them people who wishfully think. I am going to deceive them with wishful thinking. What is wishful thinking? Right? Thinking that you're doing well when you're really not. Thinking that you have a long life to live when you might not. So what happens a lot of times, and I remember my grandma telling me this, right? Because my grandma started practicing at an earlier age, maybe in the early 20s, right? Maybe even late teens. And at that time, that was, right? Is there something wrong with you? Right? Because Islam was for old people. The only people who went and performed Hajj were old people, right? So she would get this, and they would tell her, right? Why are you in such a hurry? You still have a long life to live. Once you retire, once you get older, all your kids are married, then start practicing. And once you retire from your job, then start practicing. You have a long life to live, right? Why are you in such a hurry? And this is one of the wishful thinkings that shaitan likes to use. You're going to live a long life, don't worry about it. You're okay. Well, how do you know that? Do you have a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His signature saying that you will live a long life? Do you know? Absolutely not. Another form of wishful thinking is very common. Allah Ghafur Rahim. Allah is all merciful, forgiving. Don't worry about it. Sin, Allah will forgive. Why would He punish you? Right? They have this imbalanced approach to understanding who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, and we spoke about that in a previous session, right? We worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the benevolent and most merciful, but at the same time we worship Him as the one who is all-powerful, right? And the most just. There needs to be a balance in how we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how we worship Him, so that we worship Him using all of His names and attributes, not just some. And in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. It is not by your wishes or the wishes of the people of the book. The reason why this verse was revealed was because Abu Bakr was discussing and in a conversation with a Jew, I believe. And the discussion got heated, and each one started saying, only us, we're the only ones who are going to enter paradise. So Abu Bakr said, it's only Muslims who are entering paradise, Jews aren't going to enter paradise. And then the Jew said, no, it's only us, you're not going to enter paradise. So they went back to the Prophet ﷺ complaining, saying that this person said this and that person said that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this verse. He said, لَيْسَ بِأَمَانِيِّكُمْ وَلَا أَمَانِيِّ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا يُجْزَ بِهِ وَلَا يَجِدْ لَهُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلِيًّا وَلَا نَصِيرًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is not by your wishes or the wishes of the people of the book. Meaning, you don't enter paradise just because you have a certain name or because you ascribe to a certain religion. Rather, anyone who does a sin, right, is going to be held accountable for that sin. And then the verses continue and saying that whoever believes from a male or female and does good deeds, then they are the ones who are going to enter paradise, right? Now, the verse is not saying that being a Muslim is irrelevant. It's not saying that. Because other verses say that whoever disbelieves in Quran or the Prophet ﷺ, then they have disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So being a Muslim is a condition to entering paradise post-Prophet ﷺ. What the verse is saying is that you need to change your perspective in thinking that just because you are a Muslim that you are guaranteed paradise. It's not the way it works, right? You will be held accountable for each and every action that you do, just like any other human being. So if you do a bad deed, then you will be held accountable for that. But if you believe and do a good deed, then you will be rewarded for that. So it's not about the names, right? It's about your commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your submission to Him. So we need to be careful of that type of wishful thinking, because it can really mislead a person. Now there are certain wishful thinkings that are positive, and Ibn Qayyim calls this the wishful thinking, the prophetic wishful thinking, and that is the wishful thinking that has come in hadith and Quran as well. One very well-known hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ was in an expedition walking with that unit, and he said that there are people in Medina. They're traveling now, they're outside the city, and he says that there are people who stayed in Medina who, if you take a step, it's as if they took the same exact step. If you get reward, they get the same exact reward. They said, of course, this is very curious. Who are these people? He said they are people who could not join us because of something that was holding them back, right? Such as a physical impairment, health issues, for example, old age, right? Or you don't have the financial capability of attending or participating, right? These are people whose situations, who certain things that are beyond their control prevented them from joining. But they have the intention, I am wishful, if only I had the ability to join them, then I would participate, right? This wishful thinking is so powerful that the reward that these wishful thinkers get is equivalent to that of those who are actually doing it. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يستوي القاعدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله. The reward of those who stay behind in comparison to those who actually participate is not the same. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the middle puts a exception. Those who are physically impaired. Their physical impairment prevented them from joining you, right? Their reward is based on their intention. The stronger their intention is, right, the more reward that they get. And in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that there are two types of jealousies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. There are two types of people that you are permitted to be jealous of, a certain type of jealousy. One is the person who is strong in reciting the Quran, and therefore they recite the Quran day in and day out. And this person wishes, if only I can recite the Quran like that, right? And a second person is someone who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a lot of wealth, and they are spending it for the cause of Allah in every single aspect of life. They're constantly spending for the sake of Allah. And this person says, if only I had that much money so I can do the same exact thing. The Prophet ﷺ says, Huma sawa. They are the same. Meaning the reward of the person who's doing it and the reward of the person who's intending it is the same, right? But as a caveat, the person who is doing it is getting two types of reward. The reward of the sincere intention and the reward of the physical action. Where these two types of people are equal is in the intention, not in the physical action, not necessarily in the physical action. It could be, but not necessarily. Just put that as a caveat. So that is a second thing that can really harm the heart, and that is wishful thinking. The third, but I think we're going to stop here, is at-ta'alluq bi ghayrillah, because I want to give this its so it's being attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's go ahead and stop there, because perhaps that discussion might be a little bit longer. Allah ta'ala alam, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in.